Hello, friends. Welcome to the Reversion. It's good to be here for another live stream, and I hope you're all doing well. I have a pretty exciting episode this evening, so I hope you'll stay tuned. I want to say what's up to everyone in the chat joining us here. We got Mean Eugene, Orthodox Boomer Grandma, Luigi, my friends from Discord. Welcome on in. Thank you all for joining. So we're going to be looking at something that I've covered in my recent work on esoteric Protestantism, which actually I just finished a prototype of the book cover. So I'm retitling these are from the articles I just wrote a few months ago on one's called Christian or Kabbalah and the Christian Zionist Conspiracy, and the other is, I believe it's called Kabbalah and the Protestant Revolution, 2-part series that I will be publishing as a book. So this is what it's going to look like so far. I've retitled it, and I did a bit of a deep dive, or I guess I should say I just began a deeper dive into one of the figures that I mentioned in this book. And I'm realizing I'm actually going to have to add this into my revision because it's so important. So you're kind of getting a preview here of some of the material that I'll be adding in, because I see it as an essential kind of missing piece that really ties together the thesis of this book, which is that from the onset of the Reformation, the Protestant Revolution, which is an ongoing revolution, it hasn't stopped. In fact, it's accelerated. This revolution has been empowered by not just the printing press, but also this Western esoteric spirit, and primarily Kabbalah. And this has all led to the further fragmentation of these Protestant sects and cults and the millenarian movements that we saw in the 17th century. And you can just follow the line of transmission, how they developed and how this kind of spirit of anticipation and immanentizing the eschaton came into being, where they started to believe that they could bring about by human action the end of the age. And this ultimately led to the Christian support of the Zionist state that we now have. So this figure that we're going to be doing a deep dive on this evening, Charles Taze Russell, he was an essential component to all this. And I would in fact call him the godfather of Christian Zionism. And most people haven't even heard of this guy. And so, there's a lot of really interesting connections that he had. He was a Freemason. He was the founder of the Jehovah's Witness cult, known as the Watchtower Society. And so we're going to be looking at some of the connections there. I thought I would just start with a part of my article here, if I can find it. Well, we might as well start with the Freemasonry section. Now, you're getting a preview to this because I believe this is where the paywall starts, like right at the end of this first paragraph here. So you're seeing what's behind the paywall on the part 2 article. And that's okay, because there's going to be more content here once I publish it as a book. Let me make this bigger so we can read it together. So, and I'm just, forgive me, I'm just reading the chat too. I'm seeing your chats. I just may not be able to respond to everything. If I see a good message, I'm going to share it on the screen here, so I can do that. And by the way, if you do want to donate, it's $5 for text to speech. It should read it on stream. I'm not positive, but if it doesn't, I'll read it myself. But the best way to support my work is through Substack for $9 a month, just because you're going to get so much in return. So, you'll get access to the book club, the whole archive of all of my work, which is all on Substack, exclusive podcasts, obviously this article and many others that are paywalled. So that would be the best way to support me. But, I'm not going to tell you how to donate. But okay, so let's start things off with this here, because this will kind of set the stage for why this is important and how it contributed to the establishment of Zionism and the Christian support of Zionism. And so the way that I kind of frame this is that there's like these three sections or ages almost of modern history, starting in 1517, which is obviously the Protestant Reformation. And now I'm sure you could even go further back on this, but for the sake of for this thesis, I started with 1517, pivotal year. Protestant Reformation lays the groundwork for this new religious architecture of Freemasonry, which is established exactly 200 years later with the signing of the Declaration of what is it called? The Constitution of Freemasonry, not the Declaration, the Constitution of Freemasonry. And so you have this 200-year period where it's like the destruction of the old order. The old Christian order is destroyed for 200 years. And then this new religious order, literally a new world order, is established in 1717. And this was described in a 1917 issue of the Hamburger Fremdenblatt. So I guess it was a German newspaper, which commemorated Freemasonry's 200th anniversary and the Reformation's 400th anniversary. And little trivia, I guess, what happened in 1917? Well, two things happened. You had the signing of the Balfour Declaration, and the Russian Revolution was officially underway. So that's why I kind of section these ages in history off that way. And I don't think I was I'm certainly not the first to do this. I think I remember seeing a Catholic scholar kind of frame it similarly, but 1917 also a very important year. And so the article states that it is a remarkable fact that the one rests on the other as on its foundation, and that Freemasonry is inconceivable without Protestantism. And we're going to dive deeper into how that became the case in this deep dive in this episode here. And this was a quote that kind of explains very briefly how this came about. In the Protestant countries, the Enlightenment was an alliance with the more liberal parts of Protestantism, and moreover, had no anti-religious impetus. The close ties between the Enlightenment and liberal Protestantism influenced Freemasonry in these regions, which led to a development of Freemasonry that is traceable in the different character of Masonry, for example, in France and the Anglo-Saxon world. And then just to note that Father Seraphim Rose also contextualized Freemasonry as a phase in history where man would search for a new religion beyond Christianity following the destruction of the Christian worldview by humanism and Protestantism. And so you have the establishment of all these Masonic lodges that become this like underground network to establish this new order. And I go into a little bit here, some quotes from Albert Pike explaining what Freemasonry is, tying it to Kabbalah and humanism, and how the ultimate aim of Freemasonry is to rebuild Solomon's temple. That's an important thing to note, because that is what would take us into literally the end of the age. Once that happens, I mean, we have Orthodox elders and prophets who have said something along the lines of, I don't remember exactly who said this quote. If anyone in chat knows, you can post it, but it might have been Elder Paisios, but something about you'll know when it's the end of the age, when the first stone is laid to build the third temple. So this is just like a new scientific worldview based on Francis Bacon's New Atlantis and John Dee's magical, Protestant worldview, that he had this kind of globalist idea. Excuse me. This is a quote from The History of Magic by another highly influential master mason named Eliphas Levi, who says that great Kabbalistical association known in Europe under the name of Masonry appeared suddenly in the world when revolt against the church had just succeeded in dismembering Christian unity. So again, you see that idea of the dismemberment, the destruction of the old Christian order. The allegorical end of Freemasonry is to rebuild Solomon's temple. The real end is the restoration of social unity by an alliance between reason and faith, and by reverting to the principle of the hierarchy based on science and virtue, the path of initiation and its ordeals serving as steps of ascent. And then you can see here the steps of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, literally steps of ascension. So, and then, I'm noting here how the language being used, illumination, faith, wisdom, virtue, these are all words that have obviously not a Christian, especially an Orthodox Christian meaning. They have Kabbalistic meanings that are an inversion of Orthodox Christianity. And these are, this is esoteric language. And it all involves the goal of Kabbalah, which is Tikkun Olam, which is the restoration or the rebuilding of the world, the repair of the world. So basically, like, one of my main theses is like how the Protestant Revolution was successful in contributing to that goal and the establishment of the Zionist state. So here it's about Hiram Abiff, who is this like mystical figure, or I guess mythical figure, both mystical and mythical, of speculative Freemasonry, and he's seen as like almost like the patron saint of speculative Freemasonry, because he was like the chief architect of Solomon's temple. At least that's how the myth goes. And so, this is actually from a Protestant church. They have a stained glass of this mythical Freemason. And I actually found multiple images of various Protestant churches that have Hiram Abiff in their, I hesitate to call them iconography, but I mean, yeah, Protestant iconography. Yeah, that's a good comment there. I'll take St. John Climacus the Ladder. Yeah, it is. It's like an inversion of the ladder of divine ascent, because the ascent is to like this ultimate enlightenment. So it's a humanistic ascent. So it's completely Gnostic. And so, yeah, more about, how technology plays a role in all of this. This is another theme I try to underlie, is how the printing press made all of this possible. It's ultimately like the printing press is like the machinery of revolution in the modern age. And we're going to see when we dive into this figure, this figure that we're going to be covering today, Charles Taze Russell, that he leveraged the printing press to spread all these pamphlets. So it's something, another thing that you see, even tracing back to the Reformation, all of the use of all these pamphlets that are spreading this heresy. And, if you know about how the Arian heresy was spread, it was done through song. Arius went around to different ports when he was traveling, and he had this like jingle that he would sing and the lyrics like there once was a time when he was not, something like that, about Christ. And we're going to see it again. We're going to see that Charles Taze Russell was an Arian as well. So, thus 200 years of rebuilding Dee's esoteric Protestant empire upon Bacon's Rosicrucian architecture culminated in the establishment of the premier Grand Lodge of England in 1717, powering an international Masonic network as the machinery of revolution for the age of reason to advance the Kabbalistic goal of world repair. And so for the next 200 years, the Masonic conspiracy would guide world history to its next revolution milestone in 1917 with the British signing of the Balfour Declaration and the Judeo-Bolshevik Revolution, destroying the last Orthodox Christian empire in Russia. So now we get into some of the, and I won't go over this part here. We're going to come back to this figure who's important, Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a Kabbalist or a Christian Kabbalist. He was behind a lot of these millenarian sects. One of the more notable ones being the Moravians, which are still around today. And he was, he was involved in Christian theosophy as well. So, these syncretic religions. He was, an alchemist, like most of them were. Here's an image of him being illuminated. And he also was a Sabbatean antinomianist. So he practiced this Frankist salvation through sin. So he was a complete degenerate. He was a drunk and, was engaging in these orgies and stuff. His son, he ended up moving to America because his son wanted to just go on this kind of promiscuous, gay, I don't know if I can say this on YouTube, but promiscuous, I already said it, but yeah, he was involved in, Skittles stuff. Let's say that. So yeah, let's get to this part here, because this is what's going to kind of kick this off here. So this is about dispensationalism and how dispensationalism has occult roots and how that was transmitted. It didn't start with Darby. So, I don't know how far back I should go with this, but I think this is actually, now reading it, this is a good spot to start here, because this figure, Edward Irving, is going to begin this transmission where we'll get to towards the end here. There's Darby, and then we're going to get into Miller, who was he was like the teacher of Charles Taze Russell. So we get into Russell down here. So it begins really with this. This is as far back as I could trace it, at least, was this Marano Jesuit priest. Marano, by the way, for those who don't know, is a Spanish Jewish convert to Catholicism. So he was a Marano Jesuit priest. His name was Manuel Lacunza, and he wrote this book, The Coming of the Messiah in Majesty and Glory, which played a major role in the Counter-Reformation to diminish the Protestant notion that the Pope was the Antichrist. So, basically the Jesuits were like, we need to dispel this this sentiment that the Protestants keep spreading around, that the Pope is the Antichrist. And so they tried to frame it that, it was actually not the Pope. It was someone else. I forget what it's referencing here, but the Jesuits were unsuccessful in their several attempts to introduce Lacunza's futurist system into Protestant eschatology throughout the 19th century, until a Presbyterian pastor named Edward Irving read and translated Lacunza's book, which was written under the pseudonym Ben Ezra, a converted Jew, to conceal his identity, thus taking the heat off Rome and making his writings more palatable to Protestant readers. So kind of a funny scenario here, where the Jesuits couldn't get the Protestants to even read this book because it's written by a Jesuit. So the Protestants are like, I'm not reading that Catholic nonsense. And so to get them to read it, the author disguises himself as a Jew. And then they're like, oh, I should pay attention to this. So it takes the heat off Rome. That's the kind of the goal there. Irving's adaptation of Lacunza's futurism was then introduced to John Nelson Darby. And this is like, I'm obviously making this very brief. And Darby was the founder of a Moravian sect. So there it ties into Swedenborg with the Moravians. So this was a Kabbalistic millenarian Protestant cult in Dublin so he started his own cult called the Plymouth Brethren, who further developed dispensationalism into a more comprehensive hermeneutic consisting of two distinct comings of Christ. One had a secret pre-tribulation rapture of believers where Christ gathers Christians to secretly meet him in the air. Then a second rapture occurs 7 years later when Christ saves the remnant of believing Jews and Christians during the persecutions of Antichrist. And before that, so this kind of isn't in linear order, or I think it is actually, because this was, I definitely put this in linear order. But I guess it's basically there was another key figure here named Margaret MacDonald, who was a young Scottish woman who fell ill and had this vision of a pre-tribulation rapture, and this was in 1830. And she wrote it down. I think she was into automatic writing as well. So she was doing all these occult practices, wasn't an educated Christian, and was speaking in tongues, levitating, all this occult stuff. And so this guy, Robert Norton, documented this and wrote of her and a friend saying, I have seen both her and Miss Margaret MacDonald stand like statues, scarcely touching the ground, evidently supernaturally. So it was documented that she was levitating. And maybe that was, what contributed to this idea that we're going to float into the air and be raptured off. In 1861, so 30 years later, this lawyer named Robert Baxter published MacDonald's vision after becoming disillusioned with the Irvingites. The Irvingites were another sect based on this Edward Irving, who was the originator of documenting this rapture idea. And so they provided her as the source, or they proved her as the source of Darby's new secret rapture doctrine. Despite the word rapture not appearing anywhere in the Bible or in the entirety of church history prior to 1813, the rapture delusion cemented itself into evangelical consciousness as the great American myth. And so this is kind of touching on the main theme here. So you see it just resurface again as the dispensationalist doctrine. It's a theosophic notion that God requires human agents to advance the second coming with their actions depending upon which dispensation of history is in effect. So Darby even introduced other theosophic and Masonic synthesis into his translation of the Bible, referring to Jesus as the coming one, which in theosophy is the Antichrist, and God as the grand architect, which I think we all know in Freemasonry. That's where that's the phrase used for God in Freemasonry, is the grand architect. Interestingly, one of Darby's members of his congregation was the young Aleister Crowley, and he was very influenced by this doctrine of the rapture, which he later developed into his teaching on the aeons of spiritual development. So almost like his own dispensationalism. And he synthesized it with the angelic magic of Edward Kelly and John Dee. And so you can read about John Dee and Edward Kelly in the beginning of this article. It's not behind the paywall. Crowley also coincidentally identified himself as the Antichrist as a necessary component of God's dispensation to humanity during the final days. There's Darby. And now here we're going to get into Charles Taze Russell. So this sets the stage for Charles Taze Russell here. In North America, millenarian sects spread throughout the Northeast with the emergence of the Millerite cult led by William Miller, a Freemason who began sharing his false predictions of an imminent second coming of Christ between 1843 and 1844. So basically, he had these predictions that Christ was going to return. And I didn't write this here, but this was strictly a spiritual second coming. So it would be like an invisible second coming. You wouldn't see it wasn't Christ returning in bodily form. And so this obviously didn't come to pass. And the Millerites just dissolved. That just like killed the Millerites, basically. And so they all ended up forming these other various millenarian sects, one of them being the Adventists, which are still around as the Seventh-day Adventist. And that was founded by that was I guess started by the Millerites, but Charles Taze Russell was an Adventist minister who was inspired by Miller, and Miller was like actually his like primary influence. So he was very much a disciple of Miller. And so he went on to form his own dispensationalist movement called the Watchtower Society, which later adopted the name the Jehovah's Witnesses. By 1879, Russell became the most prominent Christian Zionist of his time, teaching that God's favor had been restored to the Jews as the result of a prophetic double, which had ended in 1878, and was also reported to have worked with the Rothschilds in the Zionist project. And here's his chart of the ages, as he called it. So this is like an illustration of the dispensations. So, and you can see the Masonic imagery just in this chart, the pyramids with the Shekinah glory around it. So this guy was like obsessed with pyramids and Egyptian masonry. I'm just trying to catch up on the here. Okay. Yeah, if you're just joining us, welcome in. We're kind of just getting started here. I was just setting things up so you can have a reference for these characters here. And Russell, by the way, became the most widely published and distributed author in the United States. So he was publishing all this Christian Zionist propaganda. And then a very interesting event occurred, which I consider to be like the turning point into what's now modern Christian Zionism. And this occurred at the Hippodrome Theater, which was New York's largest theater at the time, where Charles Taze Russell delivered a sermon titled Zionism and Prophecy on how God had a separate covenant with the Jews apart from the Christians. Thus, Jewish conversion to Christianity was not necessary in their divine calling back to rule as the center of God's kingdom in Palestine. The New York American reported on that day the unusual spectacle of 4,000 Jews enthusiastically applauding a Gentile preacher after having listened to a sermon he addressed to them concerning their own religion. The mention of the name of a great leader, Herzl, who the speaker declared had been raised by God for the cause, brought a burst of applause. And here's an image of that event. So 4,000 Jews in the audience, and you have a Protestant minister who basically declared himself a pastor. He had no formal training. He had no education in Christian ministry or anything, even from like a Protestant perspective. That's seen as like, you basically have no credentials whatsoever to be teaching any theology for whatever that's worth. I mean, we all know that like even credentialed pastors are all diluted and stuff. But so that's kind of like setting this up here. Now, if we go to Charles Taze Russell, this is a Wikipedia article here. See a little bit more about him. That's him here. Actually, a better source for this would be, a better source for this would be the book that I have that we're going to be drawing from, which is this here. This is titled "The Watchtower and the Masons" by Fritz Springmeier. This was written in the 90s. And this is a fantastic resource on this, by the way. Really super well researched. So you can, see the chapters here. So we'll get into that in a little bit here, but this is let's look at his grave. So this is Charles Taze Russell. This is his grave here. This is what he was buried in. And interestingly, he was mysteriously, I think he was murdered. Does it say about his death? Let me see if it says about his death here. Yeah, death. Okay. So his health. Okay, so his health. He had cystis, and he died on October 31st, 1916. So on Halloween. And I think I remember this author, Fritz Springmeier, said something about his death was actually, there was a little bit more to it. Like there was it was possibly like some kind of ritual murder. And so that's his grave. And you can see on the top here, the cross and the crown, which is this here. The symbol is associated with Freemasonry, specifically the Knight Templar degree of the York Rite of Freemasonry. The symbol is also known as the Knight Templar's blood red passion cross and crown. The cross and the crown symbol is often surrounded by the phrase "in hoc signo vinces," which is Latin for "by this sign thou shalt conquer," which is what appeared in the sky and was revealed to Saint Constantine. But the symbol itself was used primarily by the Freemasons. And so there's actually a reference to Charles Taze Russell, his grave right here. Although Charles Taze Russell's gravesite is marked by a pyramid memorial erected by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society with the illustration of the cross and crown symbol, the Watchtower Society later discontinued using the cross and crown for some years later, viewing it as a pagan symbol. So this was the symbol of the Watchtower Society, the cross and the crown here. So he made that the symbol. He made this Masonic symbol, the symbol of the early version of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, that is true, Christian. The Knights Templar indicating this began earlier than the Protestant Revolution. Absolutely, that was hundreds of years prior. The Templars actually were like a proto-Rosicrucian order. So you had the Templars, and then that at some kind of like hard to distinguish point became the Rosicrucian order, or branched into the Rosicrucian order. And then the Rosicrucians, they developed into a bunch of different secret societies, primarily the Order of Illuminati by Adam Weishaupt. And so, again, I go into this in the article so you can see a little bit more on that and how the Rosicrucians were, kind of like an actualizing of Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, where he has these secret societies, or this one secret society called the Solomon's House, where he envisioned this elite class of advanced scientists and technologists who would rule under this secret society. So let's go to, let me see here. So anything else to cover? Oh, so you had Joseph Franklin Rutherford, who was the first president of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So once they develop into the Jehovah's Witnesses, this is another interesting figure that we're not going to get too into here, but crazy heresies here as well. I mean, these guys were all businessmen too. So, you know, we covered this a little bit in the last stream about how like these profit LARPers are all just businessmen that are exploiting, evangelicals and convincing them that they're prophets and selling all this stuff to them. Charles Taze Russell also was like known for selling this he called it holy wheat, which was like this whole scam that he was running. I wonder if it says that in here. Yeah, miracle wheat. Yeah, he called it miracle wheat. So he was accused of gaining profit from a strain of wheat he named miracle wheat. Who claimed to have discovered this strain. Russell sold the wheat for $60 per bushel, far above the average cost of wheat at the time, $60 a bushel in the early 20th century. So, and you see that like today with, these, have you guys ever seen the commercial that runs on, I don't even know if it still runs on TV, it might, but it's one of these like boomer evangelicals that like one of these pastors who sells holy water. I'm saying holy waters with like quotations. I think he calls it miracle spring water or something like that. They won't call it holy water because that's Catholic. But I think he calls it like miracle spring water, and he sells it by the bottle at late night as like one of these infomercials or whatever. So, nothing new. But okay, let's get into, I want to see if I can find in this text something about his grave and how he was buried. So just the format of this is going to be a little bit like loose because, like I said, I'm still just beginning this deep dive. So I figured I'd kind of let you guys in on this. So there's not really like a structure to this. So I'll kind of be like searching for stuff and trying to find it as it comes to mind. Yeah, I don't know if that's here. Okay. Okay, so here's about his death. On October 31st, 1916, the most remarkable man, C.T. Russell, passed into eternity wearing a Roman toga at his request. Okay. When they built the pyramid at his grave, they encased within the granite a sealed box containing a set of studies in the scriptures, copies of Russell's tracts, picturing of him, a complete set of Caratal scripture studies, and many other things to prepare him for the people he would meet, that he would meet in the next life. So, I mean, this guy was, he was an Arian. He started his own Bible study. That's kind of how he really started to spread his ideas in the beginning, was like through this Bible study. He had all these wacky beliefs, like he imposed, as well as this guy here, Franklin or Joseph Rutherford. They both imposed this really strict interpretation of the text that they said that there was no other way to interpret the Bible. So kind of borrowed from like the previous thought, school of thought where the Kabbalah was the only way to properly interpret the Bible. And actually in this book, the author Fritz Springmeier references that. He says that he looked for clear references in Charles Russell's work that can link him to some kind of Kabbalistic influence. And he said that he couldn't find any, but instead what he found was that Russell basically adopted his own language to describe Kabbalistic concepts, which is not, I mean, that's really not hard to believe, because like if you just get deep enough into Freemasonry, you're essentially you're essentially studying Kabbalah to some degree. So they were all, all these guys were aware of Kabbalah, and especially if he was like a higher level Freemason. I don't know if we know if he was a 33rd degree or what his degree was, but there's actually debate over if he was even a Freemason or not. But I think this book proves that he was. Like it's just full of evidence that he was a Freemason. So I think that, like, if you go to the Watchtower website, the Jehovah's Witness website, obviously they're denying it. So, they deny that he had any affiliation with the Masons. They might be using, like, I think I remember seeing that they often use a quote that he had where he renounces Freemasonry, but it was like prior to him becoming a Mason or something. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch screens because I want to pull up the text that I have highlighted so we can look at it a little better. Nope, not that one. That's the same thing. Here we go. Wait, is that it? One sec, let me make sure I have this open. Okay. Here we are. Okay. So this is the same book, Watchtower, the Watchtower and the Masons. Let me just check the chat, catch up here before we get into this. Russell traveled to Egypt. I didn't know that. Let's see what this says here. Ellen White of the Seventh-day Adventists has a similar pyramid grave. Some believe the pyramids were where Joseph stored the grains to avoid the 7-year famine, that they were not tombs. Interesting. Be nice when they come to the door or they mark your address down for gang stalking and stuff. Is that true? That's crazy. Do we have any former Jehovah's Witnesses in the chat? That'd be interesting. I know there's like a few I came across. I know that there's some that follow me on Twitter. I don't know if there's any that I've seen on Substack. But yeah, I mean, so I'll share a little bit about what I know about the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is kind of funny, but I learned that the Jehovah's Witnesses are actually, like, when they go to do their witnessing, they're on the clock. And they have a certain amount of hours that they're supposed to put in each week. And so, I've actually observed this. When I saw Jehovah's in my neighborhood, they park their car in a spot, and then they just, like, they walk really slowly. And that's like literally running out the clock. Like, they're just going to walk slow, and they go to door, and, they go back to their car, go to a new neighborhood or whatever. But they're actually quite pleased with being invited in and spending all 3 hours or however long it is in the same place, because it means they don't have to walk around. So even if you're there to waste their time and like try to evangelize them, they're quite pleased with that. They're fine. They don't care either way, because they're just putting in their hours. So I remember seeing this funny meme of like this kid jumping on a trampoline in a backyard, and there's like a Jehovah's Witness trying to preach to him. And like, that was my first thought. It's like that guy's probably fine with that. Like, they were trying to make it like it's funny because the kid's just like wasting his time, but like the Jehovah's Witnesses probably don't even care what's going on. Like, as long as someone's listening to them and they're like allowed on the property. Okay, so let's start with what we have here. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the highlights. I didn't even go through this whole book. I only got up to like, I guess, page 183. And there's like a bunch in between that I missed. So again, I just kind of came across this the other day, and I have to get deeper into it because I do want to add some of this stuff into the book. So this is, a little bit about Charles Russell, his upbringing, Allegheny, PA. He was raised by his father was a Presbyterian, and he was like disillusioned with all the hellfire and brimstone in Presbyterianism. So he hated that stuff and basically like renounced the Protestant Christianity, and reformed his views of Christianity to an Arian theology. So he had this Arian view of Christ. Several synods were cut off and some offenders disfellowshipped. The author hasn't confirmed which side of the disputes Joseph was on, but there are indications. Okay. The next here is... Okay, so this is about his introduction into Scottish Rite Freemasonry. There were 52 lodges in the Pittsburgh, Allegheny area, Western PA, of various kinds of Freemasons and Oddfellows, including a Scottish Rite Lodge. By 1856, the Allegheny Lodge had moved their hall a short distance from Federal Street to Water Street near Federal. 2 lodges met there, Allegheny Lodge. Okay. Russell was born in Allegheny and lived there from 1852 to 1809. The year he was born, 7 of the 20 churches in Allegheny were Presbyterian. Also of interest was the close presence of a Swedenborg New Jerusalem church. So there's Emanuel Swedenborg's, one of his churches, and the lone Jewish synagogue for the area. By 1815 or 1856, there was a grand total of 23 churches in the city, 8 of these being Presbyterian. This means, speaking in percentages, 35% of the town's churches were Presbyterian. This shows the heavy concentration of Scot-Irish immigrants in that area. The Presbyterian churches dominating Western Penn at the time. So, that Scottish population, with the presence of at least 2 Masonic lodges in the area, indicates that there was a pretty prominent presence of Freemasonry. Further, some Presbyterians Russell grew up around took an active role in the Masonic Hall. There you go. Note that a Presbyterian minister, James Anderson, was responsible for the creation of modern Freemasonry. That's going in the book. Literally a creation of Protestantism. Presbyterian ministers in Russell's day played an important role in various lodges. This has continued. Presbyterian minister James Allen Cabinis wrote The Grand Lodge of Mississippi's Official History. John McCarthy, a contemporary of C.T. Russell and a Presbyterian minister, also wrote a Masonic book. Anglican and Presbyterian ministers in the British Isles have been known to lose their jobs for speaking out against the Masons. So, I mean, it's right there. These were Presbyterian ministers. It wasn't some wacky millenarian sect. They were Presbyterians. You can't even say that. It's like, oh, well, they weren't real Protestants. They were like some esoteric cult or something. No, they were Presbyterians. Why were Presbyterians so prominent in the Masons? The answer goes back to where the modern Freemasons began. The modern rites began in the British Isles. The Scot-Irish began one of these. The Irish Grand Lodge was formed in 1725 and the Scotch the following year. The Irish played a special role in establishing the Penn Lodges. So although the Masons are now spread throughout the world, when Charles T. Russell grew up, it was still primarily a Scot-Irish/English-blooded membership. So there you go. Scientology and Freemasons, as well as Mormons, do gang stalking also. That's crazy. So they have like a pardon my French, but a shit list. So don't end up on their shit list. They'll gang stalk you. I didn't know that. I'll try to be. If I do answer the door next time, I'll try to be nice to them to some degree. But yeah, I mean, who knows what could tick them off enough to get gang stalked? Mary, so there you go. Christian Science. Mary Baker Eddy and some Mormons have used the same Masonic logo that Russell displayed. So you see some of the images here. So there's the cross and crown. It's pretty blurry, but you can see that there's the cross and crown there. Here's the constitutions of Freemasonry. Presbyterian minister Anderson's Masonic Constitution. So this was literally who wrote the Constitution of Freemasonry was a Presbyterian minister. What's something? Okay, I gotta close that. Go away. Sorry, there's something popped up. I know you can't see it. I'm trying to get rid of it. Go away. Okay, it closed the sec. Let me get this back up. Sorry about that. Okay, let's open this again. Where are we? Sorry, hang with me one sec. Trying to get this back open. It just like closed on me. Let's do this. Okay. Put this over here. All right, we're back. Did it freeze again? Okay, here we are. Window. Okay. There we go. Okay, are we good? Okay, where were we? It just froze again? All right, it's not letting me use this app. Probably have too many things open. Let me close some stuff here. Too much running. Oh, did my browser crash? Awesome. Is that going to close the stream? One sec, guys. Okay. I hope we're back. Are we good? Yes. Okay. Let me just make sure okay, we're good. Sorry about that. I just had like my browser crashed. Apparently I have too much going on. Let me close some stuff out here. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. I'm going to use the text here because I think I just can't have that other app running. So I don't have everything highlighted here, but we'll have to just find stuff, I guess. And we're going to get into this too. We're getting there. This is all leading up to how influential he was in Zionism. But back to the text here. Now I got to just go from memory what we're looking for, but let me see what I have highlighted. Okay. Sorry, I haven't been checking the chat over on Substack. Are we live on Substack? Let me just double check. We might not even be live. If not, never mind. I guess not. Okay. I don't know why. It says we're live, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on Substack. It's like kind of hit or miss with live streaming. I think they're still beta testing it. So, oh, it looks like I was live and then it just stopped. It was live for 15 minutes and it cut off. Yeah, so it's kind of wonky on Substack. So, still best place to watch the stream is YouTube. Anyway, yeah, we're good on YouTube here. So let's get back to this. Sorry, lost my place for a sec. Okay, we're back on the text here. So yeah, he's got a lot of images to show the symbology that was used, the Masonic symbols that were used in Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower Society. Careful analysis of the seal, the Great Seal of the U.S., seen on the $1 bill, discloses a mass of occult and Masonic symbols. This is no mystery to us. The other side of the Great Seal was also Masonic. Yep, I covered that as well in this article here. I actually think, was it in the first part? I can't even remember which part this stuff is in. Might have been the first part. Yeah, the Great Seal. So this is the first version of the Great Seal, which was designed by Ben Franklin, and it was rejected by Congress. And this depicts the Shekinah cloud, this Kabbalistic doctrine that this is the feminine half of God. And then you see it here as well. So there's apparently the Star of David, which I actually covered that in a recent live stream, the origins of this symbol, and the Shekinah cloud around it. So you have more Masonic and Kabbalistic imagery here. Literally on our money. You know, most people, they point to the pyramid. That's like conspiracy 101 stuff, right? It's like, whoa, bro, have you ever looked at the back of the $1 bill? There's a pyramid on it and it says New World Order. Yeah, well, no one ever looks at the other side and sees this, you know? So even on the Great Seal, there's Masonic imagery. Returning to the discussion about the Great Pyramid, two Scots, Morton Edgar and his brother, and C. Piazzi Smith were the mentors and collaborators with Russell on his pyramid ideas. The Freemasons, for some reason, have claimed Piazzi Smith's ideas as Masonic. Smythe was critical of the Masons for their lack of pyramid knowledge. You guys don't know enough about pyramids, bro. There's an imprint for the Cypherot. I would have to see what you're talking about there. I'm not seeing it here, but there could be. The Cypherot appears in a lot of stuff. Obviously, the Great Pyramid was a mystery that intrigued the esoteric Freemasons. Rosicrucian, founder of the Theosophical Society, made a trip to Egypt. There you go. Who said in chat that they made a trip to Egypt? Spot on. Because the term Golden Age is Egyptian, it is covered in this chapter. Okay, so yeah, again, it's like I'm kind of just lost in this text here, but this is like a really interesting book you can probably pick anywhere. Early Christians and Jews. This was written by a Protestant too, keep that in mind. Russell shared, so here we go, dispensationalism. Russell shared company with some other premillennialists that referred to a golden age. S.J. Andrews in God's revelations of himself to man. The kingdom period will be a true golden age of the world. So it appears that Charles T. Russell could have picked up the term golden age by reading premillennial and Adventist literature, or he could have picked up by studying the classical Greek or the religions of the Middle East. It is a given that he was reading the Christian literature. It would be most natural to assume that he borrowed the term from Christian sources. So again, there's his grave, buried in a pyramid, very bizarre, just surrounding all these normal tombstones. So he delivered a Masonic sermon as well. Here it is. So you can read the original. And yeah, he's referencing the orders of Masonry. Some more here. So yeah, we won't read all of this, but it's like overwhelming the amount of evidence that he was a Freemason. It's like there's no doubting it. I mean, it's so weird that there's like debate over this. Yeah, this is all from his own words. And we also have a scholar of C.T. Russell commented once that it is unknown when Russell became an Arian. Arian referring to Arius. It says anus is heresy. Which is actually funny, I guess, typo there, because does anyone know how Arius died? And there's an icon actually depicting this, which is kind of funny. I'll see if I can find it. Arius literally died shitting himself. Here it is. There's one image of it. He shot himself to death. There's another one. He's in the outhouse, and there's St. Nicholas and Arius, I guess. St. Nicholas about to slap him. Slapped him so hard he shot himself to death. So that's how he died. So it's a funny typo that says anus is heresy. Anus is heresy in believing that Christ is only a good man and not Almighty God. Much attention has been given to Russell's concepts and teaching. Surprisingly little has been paid to sources. Okay. What else do we have here? More about the pyramid. I want to get into, there's a chapter on the Zionism. So let's shift into yeah, here we go. Russell's Zionism, Masonic. And just to kind of supplement this, we're going to refer to this text here, which is short, but this is a good resource too, because he cites some of the quotes from the secular Zionists attributing the efforts of Charles Taze Russell to the success of establishing the modern state of Israel. So Theodore, and I think I cite this in my article, if I'm not mistaken, Theodor Herzl published his pamphlet, Der Judenstaat, which is I think it's the Jewish state, in 1896, and 2 years later organized the first World Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. But in fact, the notion of a Jewish state in Palestine had been making the rounds in European and American circles in various forms. One of its keenest proponents was a Christian preacher and Bible scholar named Charles Taze Russell. The proposition boldly put forward by Pastor Russell contrasted with the position of many Christian churches at the time, where the feeling was that God's covenant with the Jews had long since ended and they should convert to Christianity. So there's this is where this shift came, where there was no more proselytizing of the Jews. I mean, there was, but not like on a larger scale, because now this new doctrine was adopted thanks to Charles Russell, that the Jews had their own separate covenant, therefore they didn't need to convert. So this dual covenant theology. The Prescient pastor predicted a massive exodus of Jews from Russia and Eastern Europe. Much as he predicted, by 1924, more than 3 million Jews had emigrated from Russia and Eastern Europe. Russell himself did not live long enough to see his prophecy made manifest, and dying in 1916. So he died a year before the signing of the Balfour Declaration. And he had all these failed prophecies too, by the way. So it's interesting that he died before the one prediction he got right came to pass. Russell's legacy as an enthusiastic, non-proselytizing Zionist had been acknowledged by none other than the incumbent Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who said, "A recognition of Pastor Russell's important role as an early American Christian advocate of Zionism is long overdue." The late Jeane Kirkpatrick, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, called Russell a neglected man and chapter in the history of Zionism. So that's how important he was to the, winning over the Christian support, the American evangelical support for establishing the Zionist state. We often look to these guys like Darby and Schofield. Those are the two names that come up, but nobody ever talks about Charles Taze Russell. And it's not to say that Darby and Schofield didn't play a major role, but I think, when you look at the fact that Russell was the most widely published or self-published author, and he was writing all this, eschatological propaganda, this Zionist propaganda, that's pretty impactful. So you kind of, you coincide that with the dissemination of the Schofield Bible, which was happening a little bit later. This was before the Schofield Bible. Or I guess, it actually was around the same time. So it was towards the end of his life, because I think it was like 1909, I think, was the first edition of the Schofield Bible. I don't think it made its way into American universities until the 1920s, if I'm not mistaken. So after he had died. Because what happened was, like, the Balfour Declaration didn't solidify it wasn't like that was when Israel was established, because we know it was later in 1948. But that's what won over the British in support. They still needed American support, so that's why Russell and Schofield were paramount to winning over American evangelicals to support Zionism. What's this here? The Star of David's origins are from the priestly robes ordained by Yahweh. He commanded pomegranates to be sown in the hem. If you look down the pomegranate, you should see the 6-point Star of David. Interesting. I overlooked that one in my coverage of that. Sorry, I'm just catching up on chat. Okay. So yeah, this is a good supplement to what we're gonna look into a little bit more here. Oh, he had a Yiddish newspaper, huh? Dear sir, your sympathetic interest in the Jewish people for years past has not escaped our notice. Your denunciation of the atrocities perpetuated against our race in the name of Christianity has added to our conviction that you are a sincere friend. Your discourse on Jerusalem and Jewish hopes has struck a responsive chord in the hearts of many of our people. Still, we doubted for a time if any Christian minister could really be interested in a Jew as a Jew, and merely from a hope of proselytizing him. So they loved that he wasn't proselytizing them. They loved that. He's a good goy. these things, Pastor Russell, have led to the formation of a Jewish mass meeting committee. So this is what I covered this already. This was the his sermon at the Hippodrome. So yeah, we covered that. So you know, you can kind of piece that together now, how that all came about. And you know, as you'll see in my articles, that you know that this certainly did not start in the late 19th and early 20th century. This was a centuries-long transmission of Zionism, of Christian Zionism, that I would say really began very evidently in the 17th century. So about 100 years after the Reformation, you start to see it really accelerate through these millenarian cults in England in the 17th century, and especially with the readmitting of the Jews back into England, thanks to Cromwell, during the time of Sabbatai Zevi's revealing of himself as the Jewish Messiah, and being largely responsible for the spreading of Lurianic Kabbalah throughout Europe. So all these things are happening at the same time. So like, you know, that's why I cover all that, because it's like you might read this and be like, how did this guy pick up on all this wacky esotericism? Well, it was there. It was already there. It was just transmitted. So yeah, and I think the reason I'm pretty sure I use this as a source for my work. So that's in there. You know, all the good parts I think I've included in my article. What's this here? Oh, I don't have sound, but yeah, this was something else I wanted to play. This is a video from Vice when Vice was actually doing real journalism, or I guess it was a year ago. It's not too bad. I don't know what Vice has been up to, but you know, they do occasionally some good coverage. So this is a whistleblower from the Jehovah's Witnesses who is documenting all these weird blood rituals and PDF file stuff. So I'll play this, but let me just make sure I covered everything I wanted to. Again, I lost the text that I was drawing from. I had a bunch of highlights, so there's probably stuff that I missed. And by the way, this could all be done also for Mormonism. I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that Mormonism was highly influenced by Freemasonry as well, and many of their rites and their initiation ritual. They're drawing from Freemasonry. A lot of their symbols, so a lot of the same stuff. You know, you see the same stuff here. Symbols being recycled and them, you know, copying rites and rituals and things like that. Sorry, I'm just catching up on chat here. What's Felipe talking about here? Have you checked out Christopher John Burkiny's channel? No, I have not. I became an agnostic due to his analysis on Christianity and Kabbalah and how one serves the other. I don't know who that is, but that sounds pretty ridiculous. I mean, the thing is, so like the way that I cover it is that it made, like, Kabbalah influenced Protestantism from the Renaissance, but not Christianity as a whole. That wouldn't even make sense because the timeline doesn't match up. Kabbalah dates back to, at least in the oral transmission, and this was actually uncovered by Gershom Scholem, who's like he's like the foremost scholar on Kabbalah, like undisputed. He gave it a dating of the Middle Ages, so like it really wasn't even it wasn't really widely known at all until the Middle Ages, where it started to spread and spread in the written form, at least. So I don't even know how he would draw that conclusion. That doesn't even make sense whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, there, you know, like I said, in my work I'm covering here, you can see how it influenced certain sects of Protestantism. But, you know, there's no traces of it in Orthodoxy. That would be a very, I can't even imagine how you would make that case. So I don't know anything about that guy and his research, but that just based on the thesis that you just presented me, like Christianity as a whole, there's no way. Abrahamic mysticism in general. Yeah. Well, so even the Abrahamic mysticism, like the Merkaba mysticism is like, it's all based on a fabrication. It's the same thing with Hermeticism. So the Renaissance Hermeticists, they believed that this notion of Prisca Theologia, which is that the oldest religion is the most true. And so the myth of Hermeticism is that this was the esoteric knowledge that was transmitted to Moses by angels. And, it's just all based on like presuppositions. There's no way to actually prove any of that. And it was debunked by, I'm trying to remember this guy's name, another Renaissance scholar. I can't remember his name. Who basically found that there was all these Neoplatonic references in Kabbalah. So there's no way that it could date back that old, because it has all these Zoroastrian deities and stuff. But I have covered in my work Merkaba mysticism. So you can find that. Let me see if I can. I don't remember what I titled it. It's one of my earlier articles on Kabbalah. I think it's this one. I did cover that there was some form of Jewish mysticism being practiced that you can see in the Acts of the Apostles, where there was these book burnings in Ephesus. The Christians in Asia Minor were converted out of Phrygian mystery religions, Babylonian magic and astrology used in Kabbalah. So, and by that I mean like later in Kabbalah. Ephesus was in a state of spiritual and civilizational crisis, with widespread worship of the city's patron goddess Artemis and questions concerning the spiritual power of Christ over the demonic forces that manifested in Hellenistic culture. So here in Acts 19:18 through 19, it says, "And many who had believed, confessing and telling their deeds, also many of those who had practiced magic brought their books together and burned them in the sight of all, and they counted up the value, and it was totaled 50,000 pieces of silver." And so speculatively, these were, and I think it even says that they're magic books. And so it's like, okay, well, what kind of magic is that? Well, it was like Phrygian mystery religions. It probably had some, some form of like Merkaba mysticism in it, which is early Kabbalah. So if that's what you're referring to, you can maybe link that there, which was, I think, what I was trying to do here. But that could also be something else. So yeah, I've done some work on it. And I think that I would probably, if I could go back and revise this, I'd probably revise some things. Not that it's like completely untrue or anything, but this part is pretty interesting. How there was this information war over the Talmud, the burning of the Talmud at the onset of the invention of the printing press before the Reformation. Okay. Let me go to this video. I think I've covered a lot here about Charles Taze Russell. There's still a lot more, and I'm quite sure I missed some pretty interesting things as well that are in this book. So you can check out the book yourself. This is the book, The Watchtower and the Masons. You can find the PDF somewhere. I don't know that you can even buy this anymore. So I think you have to get the PDF. Oh, there's some stuff about Martin Luther that I'm going to have to go back to. So yeah, I think and there's a whole chapter. So let's go to 35 real quick. There's a whole chapter on the similarities between Masonry and Jehovah's Witness. So here's some of the theology. Again, I'm not going to go through all this, but both claim not to be a religion, nor a religious body, nor a denomination, but only serve God and allow freedom of conscience. Members of the organization do not need to renounce their membership, mother religious bodies. I think that's another typo, of other religious bodies. The church is a pyramid in both. So the chapter, he's drawing all these parallels to the two. Again, a lot, like at some point, it's like it gets a little bit, like it's still interesting, and I would still read through all of it, but like a strong case like this, it almost becomes redundant. It's like, oh man, okay, I get it. And you know, it's a good reference to find stuff like quotes and things like that. So I'll read through all of this. Like if you don't have the time or you don't want to, I'm going to distill the key parts of this as they relate to my book, and I'll include. I'll probably just extend this section here on Charles Taze Russell. This section. So like probably I'll put that somewhere around here. Just kind of extend that. Anyway, let's watch this video because I haven't watched this and I found it and I thought maybe as a little bonus we can see where this Jehovah's Witness cult has ended up. And, you know, you'll see the same pattern in many of these cults where there's these blood rituals and, you know, child PDF file stuff. So let me fix this so I can get the audio. And I guess just a warning that this is likely going to be pretty dark. So, I mean, if this kind of stuff turns your stomach, well, I'm not sure even why you'd be watching my stream. I think you know what you're getting into at this point. Let me just fix this so we can get the full screen. Okay, let's get this. All right.
They maintain this silence out of fear. The reputation has to come first. We are purposely isolated. We are not to have anything to do with the world.
It's like Bane.
So there are about 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses in the world today. They have a belief that we are living in the time of the end.
Of course.
Door-to-door activity is paramount, but that's what Jehovah's Witnesses are known for. I was a child, 5 years old, when my mother and father became Jehovah's
I think this guy doxed himself. He's British. Get him, boys.
Witnesses. So I really knew nothing else. It was inculcated in me that all the other religions were false. They were
who's the man in the suit? So this is a Jehovah's Witness whistleblower. So, you know, he's like, if you've ever seen these whistleblower videos, they always like put a voice mod on them and mask them so that they don't get killed or something.
Under Satan, the devil's influence. I took it very seriously. I became an elder.
An elder?
An elder is someone that has the responsibility to teach, to stand on the platform and give talks. I really didn't allow myself to even discuss or think, I wonder if this is right. They are able to control how you think.
I just want to pause this because I'm just noticing now we've got a former Jehovah's Witness in the chat. Thank you for sharing, Skeletum, or Skeletium. Lord of Mercy, I'm a former VW. I would go to an Orthodox church, but haven't worked out how to deal with the ramifications to my life of doing so. Well, let's keep Skeletium in our prayers. You don't have to share about your personal situation with that, but I pray that you can make your way to a divine liturgy and come and see, as we say. Just come and see. All you have to do is just show up to the liturgy, talk to the priest. If it's a good Orthodox parish, the priest will introduce himself to you and show you around, explain things, answer any questions you have. So I would encourage you to do that. But, I don't know what you're alluding to that, about the personal ramifications. If it has to do with like the stuff, like the reason why this guy's masked, Lord have mercy. Because I know it's a cult. So it's like, who knows what's actually going on there. I know it's similar with the Mormons too. So if you go back and listen to, I did a podcast earlier this year. When was this? This one here. Dark Secrets of Mormonism Revealed. I interviewed an ex-Mormon who became an Orthodox Christian. And I would love to have him back on because we didn't even scratch the surface. But if you listen to this, you'll notice I multiple times kind of bring this up. This question of like, were you scared to leave? Because he left with this whole family. And what I was getting at was like, did you feel like you were in danger to any degree by leaving? Like, was there a threat on your life or anything like that? It seemed like there wasn't, but I would imagine that varies based on how far into it you get. As you climb the higher degrees, it becomes a much bigger deal if you leave and you were exposed to all these secrets.
And if you don't agree with their beliefs,
Sorry, I just realized you weren't seeing what I was showing you there because I wasn't sharing the tab. So let me just, it's this one here. Let me make that smaller. It's this podcast. It's called Dark Secrets of Mormonism Revealed. So, and you can see what we discussed here. I don't remember if this is paywalled or not, but if it is, there's definitely a free preview. So, all right, let's get back to the video here. Where's the video? I can't find it now. Okay, here.
You can get yourself into trouble. There is a cover-up of sexual abuse. I now know and can tell you with certainty that it is very, very prevalent. I was sexually abused by a Jehovah's Witness. I didn't do anything about that. To be honest, when it was first happening, I didn't know what was happening. When I was old enough to find out or know what
so he's a kid.
I was then so embarrassed I didn't want to talk about it. I discovered
punished XJW
me had gone on to abuse another member of my family. What was seriously catastrophic was finding out that my own daughter at 15 or 16 came forward to tell me about her abuse. That caused a great consternation within the congregation because the elder who abused my daughter was very popular. So you have people saying, no, he wouldn't do that. She must be lying. The youngster is seen as a troublemaker. Later, other people came forward and that abuser of my daughter was taken to court with 4 victims and was found guilty. I can tell you that my daughter only wanted an apology. Because they didn't, she decided to take Jehovah's Witnesses to court. As did many other people. In
You
lots
can probably
of those
find this
cases,
case too.
Jehovah's Witnesses have settled out of court, but made the victim sign a disclaimer to say, we won't tell anyone. I'm not saying that all Jehovah's Witnesses are child abusers or are bad.
They probably
Obviously,
are.
that's not the case. However, Jehovah's Witnesses have never really said, we have a problem. They have what we call a two-witness rule. And it is the Bible that says that before a matter can be proved, you need two witnesses. In a case of child sexual abuse or any sexual abuse, it's going to be very difficult to get two witnesses. We had an adult female that was raped by an elder, and it was the same elder that abused my daughter. The congregation elders said, oh, that's a shame. One's an adult and one's a child. We can't say that that's two witnesses. There's a very common phrase within Jehovah's Witnesses that we have to watch our behavior, that it doesn't bring reproach on Jehovah's name. So they maintain this silence out of fear. And so the reputation has to come first. We are purposely isolated. To be disfellowshipped is to be officially thrown out of the organization. It's an announcement that's made where the person's name is read out and they are told that Mr. XXX is no longer a Jehovah's Witness. That's a signal that the congregation have nothing to do with that person.
Okay, I kind of get it. I kind of get the point here. I don't know that we need to watch this whole thing, but I did find something here. Let me go back to this. Yeah, you can just do a search for this and see what he's talking about. So there's actual convictions that are occurring. It's like more than one case. 2023, this year. There's something here. There's a whole law firm that deals with JWSA. There's a whole Wikipedia article on it. 1,000 alleged perpetuators of SA, child SA, since 1950. Wow. And it's probably way higher than that, too. That's just what we know. Lord of mercy. And there's the two-witness rule that he was talking about. You need a testimony of two material witnesses to establish a perpetrator's serious sin in the absence of confession. That's insane. Wow. And then someone mentioned here in the chat, isn't Putin anti-Jehovah's? I don't know, but there's actually a history that I think that was covered in this book here. I'm glad that was brought up because that was another thing I was trying to find. He covers like how they tried to spread Jehovah's Witness throughout Russia, and they actually had a pretty large Russian population of Jehovah's Witnesses. Russell applauded as his prediction starting to happen. Russell advertised Herzl's launching of Zionism, published in a Yiddish paper, which also circulated in Europe and Russia. I don't know if he covers it here. But, I did a search on it, and this is a questionable source here, but Wikipedia, persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia. So maybe you're right. I don't know if this is like an ongoing thing. But interesting, it's like, why are they even there? How did that many Jehovah's Witnesses even get to Russia? So a whole other rabbit hole there. Yeah, Kagi, that's the search engine I use. It's a paid search engine. And you might think, why would I pay for a search engine? It's because it has no ads. And it actually gives you the results you're looking for. And it's like got a pretty good, it's got a lot of advanced search options. So you can, search for forums, you can search 4chan, small web, PDFs, Usenet. So it's really good for research. And, the thing with like any search engine that's free is like they're not actually free. You're paying with your attention because they have targeted ads on every search. So instead of that, I just pay, I think it's like $8 a month for this search engine. I use it thousands of times in a month. So I'm getting a ton of usage out of it. And it's been great. I love Kagi. It's a little Kagi promo there. I'm not getting any money from that, but. And you can like customize it and stuff, but so all right, I think I've covered everything that I could think of off the top of my head that I wanted to, but you can see how there's a lot to uncover here that I didn't even go over because you have this whole book is this one rather. Is a gold mine for this subject. So I just wanted to share some of the stuff I found from it. But like I said, there's a lot more. And I do plan to dive further into this and include more of it in my book when I publish it. So, I've been saying this for a while, but the researching this topic, not just this topic, but like, esotericism and secret societies and Protestantism, it's seemingly endless. So it's been very challenging to even just publish something because it seems like there's no cutoff. Like it can keep going. You can go down all these rabbit holes. There's a ton of stuff. The biggest challenge was not going too far off from the main thesis. But in even doing that, I feel like I maybe went in one too many directions, if that. It's just very challenging. So, even as I'm revising this and, thinking I've got all the research done, I just kind of need to clean it up and make it a little bit more readable for a Protestant audience for when I publish it. I'm still finding more stuff that it's like, this could easily go back in. That easily go into the book to strengthen my case, and fill in some gaps. So, and this is just with one thing that I found. I mean, this probably would happen with everything that I covered. So, there's a whole lot of stuff out there. You just have to know how to find it, I guess. And something like this, you can't just buy this book. So this is why I pay for a search engine, because you can find all kinds of interesting PDFs that you didn't even know existed because the books are not published. So you can't just like search on Amazon for this and find something. All right. Let me just catch up on chat here. Let me see. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. We had a nice lively chat this evening. I really loved to see it. So, I've been doing these streams every week, sometimes twice a week. I might do it more. I might do them less coming up because I'll be a little bit busy with some personal things, but I really enjoy these. So, I've been getting pretty good feedback. So I'm glad you guys enjoy it. These live deep dives, I can do other stuff as well. So, make sure you're in the Discord. If you have any material that you would like to see me cover live, you can post it in there. And that would give me more stuff to cover because sometimes I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But for the next one, maybe we can do the same thing and just look into the influences of Masonry with Mormonism. There's a lot of topics that we can cover, but we can also do these like just hangout streams, which I plan to do. If I don't have anything to cover, I'll just jump on here and we can just chill, look at some videos or something. But it's been fun. I'm enjoying it. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for tuning in. Clearly, nobody has studied the Masonic infiltration in the Russian Orthodox Church here. Well, I don't know about here, but I've definitely seen stuff about that. That's really, I mean, that's not like we don't recognize that. That's nothing that we're unaware of. It's it's maybe not something that a bunch of us have done deep dives into, but it's like not really something that is a mystery to us. I don't think that it debunks orthodoxy. It's like there's fallible people in the church. Like we don't, it's not like it doesn't have quite the same implications of Masonry infiltrating the Vatican. Let's just say that. But yeah, it's a problem. We acknowledge that it's a problem. All right, guys. Well, yeah, I'm not seeing too much else here. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, make sure you join the Discord where all the offline discussion is happening, or I guess offline in terms of not on the stream, but very lively chats happening there all day, all night. It's been growing very quickly, especially since I've been publishing here on YouTube. So a lot of great conversations happening in there, and I look forward to hanging out with you, chatting with you guys there. And until next time, we'll see you on the timeline, I guess. God bless everyone. Take care. Good night.